Welcome back, episode 2 of Pardon the Disruption. I was hoping we'd all learn from the mistakes of episode 1, but you all seem to have come back, so that's something to work on. My name's David Sargeant. I'm a sports betting consultant. I work on market access, help sports teams and organizations navigate the fun betting space. But it's not about me. It's about our two amazing panelists here who are going to help me navigate this roller coaster that is sports disruption. First up, we're getting heckled already. First up, we've got Paris Smith, CEO of Pinnacle Sports. Under Paris's helm, she's turned Pinnacle into the world-famous, sharpest lines, innovative esports leader that it is today. And well, we've got Chris too. Hi, Chris. I did. Serial entrepreneur, serial founder.
Love cereal.
Breakfast cereal eater. That was good. That was my gag. You ruined my gag.
Samir do is step on all your jokes until they die.
That's good. They weren't funny to begin with. So, and founding partner of Acies. I never know how to say that. Brilliant.
However you like.
But I did look on your Wikipedia page, which is quite interesting. Do you know you've got a Wikipedia page?
No, I did not.
And the thing that made me laugh the most, though, is it says your ambition is to retire on a perpetual round-the-world cruise with your cats, which I thought was interesting. Is that true?
They're all dead, so no.
How awkward. New cats. Okay.
Yeah.
Should we move on?
Let's.
This is going well so far. Good. Thank God we know something about sports betting. So I don't know if anyone saw the earlier format, but the format is like quick-fire questions. You're going to get like just a few minutes to answer. If you're boring, we'll move on. So no pressure. So, we've already started as well. Cool. Do you know how we go back?
Red button.
Red button. No. So we're just going to go for it anyway. So first question. Flutter recently compared themselves to Netflix and Uber in that dominant market share continually kind of reinforces dominance. Do you think that can only grow? Have they hit a ceiling? Is there room for more? What do we expect? Chris, give us the.
Yeah, I think comparing yourself to Netflix is a little dodgy and maybe not the comparison you would like to make because it reinforces that there are several deep-pocketed competitors who are still relatively on the sidelines who have the ability to disrupt that share. With that said, if I had been asked this question 2 years ago, I would have said, yes, Fanduel is at a ceiling, and I would have been dead wrong, and I was. I was asked that question. I did give that answer, and I was wrong. So I think the question you have to be able to answer to say that they are at a ceiling is, what's the credible plan for their competitors to either make share or take share? And I don't know that I've necessarily heard that credible plan yet come from their competitors. Doesn't mean it can't, but I haven't heard them articulate it yet. Definitely haven't seen them execute on it yet.
I think they came in early, so they definitely were the leaders. They had their sports betting expertise that many didn't have. And they very, very confident, interestingly confident comment, but if they believe that, that's great. And there will be disruptors, right? I mean, right now, nobody can do anything. Everybody's so focused on regulations, compliance, getting into the next state. There is no innovation. Everything is kind of at a standstill for now. And when that levels out, there will be people coming in and, coming for them. There will be people that have different levels of investment opportunities and capabilities. And then, there's still companies, Amazon could come in or Netflix could come in and say, hey, we're Netflix and now we're going to compare ourselves to you. So I think that there is, whatever the ceiling is, I'm not 100% sure, but I think that they're definitely going to get a run for their money.
And where is that? What are their weaknesses that a potential competitor can exploit? Because they seem to be so kind of strong right now, at least from the outside.
Well, we keep talking about parlays are so popular. Well, the actual lines for betting are not very inviting, but they have the best line that's out there today. So I think that's what keeps them going. But again, things will have to change eventually.
Do you see that, Chris? Do you see any weaknesses? Do you see any cracks in the...
Yeah, I think one thing to zero in on is they're definitely underperforming on the online casino side relative to the dominance on the OSB. If you think about the ratio of performance from BetMGM across those two products or DraftKings, there is a potential weakness there. I think also to Paris's point, and by the way, for the record, if Paris disagrees with me, she's right. And if she agrees with me, she's also right. I don't quite understand the logic to
International
that,
Women's
but
Day.
that's how it goes. International Paris Day. So there's definitely something to considering how many of the advantages that FanDuel currently enjoys have a half-life, right? The DFS database has a half-life. The operational head start that Paris referenced, thanks to the fact that they've been operating Betfair in New Jersey for almost a decade now, has a half-life. The running start in states versus a standing start or a catch-up has a half-life. What that half-life is, debatable, but I think there is definitely a degradation of those advantages over time. Some may compound, but some also weaken. I think we are seeing some evidence of that occurring. But then again, who knows? Maybe they'll end up with 120% market share, violate the laws of math and physics. The U.S. is that different.
It's all in Fahrenheit.
That different.
Okay, let's move on. Can we do that? Yeah. Wow. So it's amazing,
Technology.
isn't it? I think I can shine a laser
Science.
at you too. So coming from the UK, like the UK gambling industry pretty much sucks from a regulatory view in the fact that kind of European regulators have decided that the way to stop problem gambling is just to stop gambling, stop regulated gambling, which is obviously a false economy. But we're kind of seeing that, those kind of hints that might happen here too. Are we going to see affordability checks? Are we going to see advertising restrictions in the US? Do we care? Is it going to happen? What do you think, Paris?
I think there's definitely going to be the affordability checks. Source of wealth, that's just becoming a common thing. You can't do anything without getting that checked right now. But from the advertising perspective, in the US, that's not going to be impacted, of course, because of the First Amendment right. So there's going to be more and more advertising, which I don't even know if anybody could stomach it, but at this stage, it's going to keep going.
Here I'm going to disagree with Paris, which again means that she's right. I think the affordability checks are the thing that actually culturally will not be stomached in the U.S. I think that's something that's going to be a tough sell from a privacy perspective, and I think that there aren't a lot of great analogs in terms of other D2C industries in the U.S. that have that baked in. On the advertising side, First Amendment is powerful, but still limited, right? We definitely do have analogs, the restriction of alcohol advertising, the restriction of tobacco advertising, and there's hard limits and then there's soft limits, right? So when I think about soft limits, I think about regulators like in Ohio waking up and saying, good morning, here's a 6-figure fine. Good afternoon, here's a 7-figure fine. I think about regulators in Massachusetts and New York waking up and saying, here is a wildly insane set of restrictions on how you can market, how you can expose these opportunities. Those end up being softer restrictions, but they may have more of a cumulative impact because as much as our industry is not necessarily in the US, is not at the point where it's able to fully execute on innovation on the product side, I think there's a similar deficit when it comes to innovation on the marketing side. So I don't know that there's that deep bench of ideas, alternatives, et cetera, to pursue. I think you heard a little of that from the last panel as well. The newer thinking around content, building audiences, access to audiences is not happening within operators. It's happening within these younger independent companies. So if you get that soft restriction on marketing, I don't necessarily know that anyone from a Fanduel down to a Caesars, down to a Tipico necessarily has a deep well of alternative ways to deploy marketing and attract consumers.
Because I find that like that New York Times articles on it kind
that
of
was
like,
awesome, wasn't it?
To me, it felt like that gave regulators an excuse. It gave them some teeth a little bit, and I think the Massachusetts one was the most interesting as a result because maybe some operators didn't go in because they were worried about that public grilling. Are we seeing regulators getting teeth? Are we seeing them for the first time? Like, should we be worried?
Well, I think,
Maybe worried is the wrong word.
But I think at some point in time, I mean, of course, regulators can make you worried. But it's, it would just be, what is the purpose of regulating gaming? It's to generate revenue. And it's so counterintuitive, so many different things that are happening, so many different, even if you start doing the affordability checks and things like that. So, I think, they have their teeth for sure. And, but to be a facilitator, that's really, that's where I can see the whole, whether it be iGaming or sports betting, moving forward and actually getting a nice momentum, it would have to be with that shift in thinking.
It's a perfect segue to the next question. I think if I push that button, look, that's all happens. It's made technology, it's great. So that whole onshore, offshore question, because I find like I think some of the regulators did a great job in convincing affiliates offshore to come onshore, be legit, only back kind of regulated markets. But there's a lot of kind of offshore operators still making a lot of money out there. Is there an avenue, do we think, here that some of those brands can come onshore? Is there a route for them?
I don't think there's a financial incentive for them, full stop, right? Because currently, if you're offshore, you get to offer a complete suite of products, usually in a far more favorable tax environment, and also in some situations with a better CAC to LTV ratio. So as long as you have that asymmetry of, if I continue to operate offshore, I can do OSB, I can do casino, and I can do it in a way where I'm free from the constrictures of regulators saying how I can and can't offer those products, or even if I can offer them in the first place, seems tough for me. I also do think there's a little bit of an over-indexing on the idea that offshores have a brand affinity that would port well into the regulated market. I think part of the affinity is that they are offshore and the consumer experience that enables. And I think you would see a fair amount of leakage if one of those brands attempted to come into the regulated market. So I don't see, but I'm about to be told how wrong I am, which is great. It's humbling, which is always a good thing. I don't see the financial incentive. And so I don't think the question ever gets answered because I don't know that it ever gets asked.
Yeah. Well, I think that, the financial incentives, so when Pinnacle pulled out, it wasn't about, obviously, financial incentives because we went from hero to zero financially, but, just that regulatory risk. We wanted to be able to go back to the U.S. We wanted to live a life. So that's the incentive. And I think it's about timing because the reality is what is happening with all the sports books that are in the U.S. right now, they're learning and living through what the offshore market had already learned all the lessons from 15, 20 years ago. So, even where, clients are going through and taking advantage of different bet offerings, I can say for Pinnacle, we have things in place that are going to trigger because we have so much player profiling available. So, the lessons that we've learned, if you bring in the offshore, I think timing is critical. There's complete non-fairness in somebody who's raking it in today and goes, oh, tomorrow, we're going to go in the U.S. market. I think that's totally ridiculous. There was a time where it was very clear that you should not be operating here. And, of course, something a little self-serving. But if you got out, for example, in 2007, then you should be able to operate here. That was the Pinnacle story. But, but that expertise in actual sports betting, that's what the U.S. market's missing by not having that transition over.
So I like that because you disagreed, but you agreed in the end. So it's not about brand, it's not about database, but maybe it's about expertise and other differential. Which brings us kind of onto the next, push the button, remember, David. The next is on new revenue streams. We're talking a lot, I'm so bored of talking about bonuses and unaffordability. So let's talk about where can operators find new revenue? Is it in new products? You talk a lot, Chris, about casinification of sports betting. Is that the route we're going? Is it new cohorts? Is it about finding new markets, new demographics to reach? What does the panel think? Chris?
Yeah, the answer is yes, right? It's all of those things, and this is one of my favorite themes. Maybe in order, I think it does have to be about new product first, and whether that's taking the existing sports betting product and extending it, whether it's morphing it into something that is more chance-based and more casino-like, or if it's about looking to adjacent products, whether that's fantasy, skill-based, or sweeps. And increasingly, a thesis that I'm becoming more and more enamored with is the idea that global gambling companies are going to start eyeing casual mobile gaming in a more serious way over the next few years. Significant TAM, way fewer regulatory headaches, and a lot of what they are already good at in terms of customer acquisition, monetization, funneling, and the underlying game mechanics does port from gambling into casual games. So I think we'll see it in some small ways in the near term, but it would not surprise me if Snake kind of ends up eating its own tail and gaming companies, our euphemism for gambling companies, actually do end up becoming gaming companies in the truer, more mainstream sense of the word.
I really want you to disagree with him, Paris, because it's a bit annoying when he goes on about that.
Yeah. It's interesting because there's, I keep thinking of the traditional, because that's where I'm from, the traditional gaming. But, there's so many things that have evolved that weren't here 5 years ago that are absolute mainstream right now. Mm-hmm. So I think that there is room for innovation. I don't think it's going to come from the industry, to be honest with you. But I think, when people start understanding the industry and the opportunities within the industry, that will be the time where something starts clicking in. Of course, we'll take all those ideas and try to make them better, because that's how that works. But I think that there is room for it, and it might be I don't know. Is there a question about esports? But is esports going to be big? Probably not, because probably not for the next 3 to 8 years, because the regulators have to keep up with it. And the way in which it's being regulated and viewed upon, there's so much progress in Vegas and so much progress in New Jersey, but it still doesn't allow for an operator to truly get a financial gain from the esports market.
So, although we've run out of time, I'm going to ask another question. But if Pinnacle were allowed to bring their product here, do you think they'd wipe the floor with everyone? Do you think you're a product revenue innovation that changes the market?
I think we'd be competitive.
Oof, spicy. Like it.
For anybody who actually understands betting.
Hashtag spicy.
Yeah, hashtag spicy.
Nice. Right?
It's good. It's very good.
Every presentation I'm in, Fanatics seems to be the argument of the moment.
I'm sorry, who?
Exactly.
Right.
That's why you should use other consulting groups. So I want your view. Like Fanatics are about to launch in a big way. Is there room for them? What makes them a top 3, top 5 operator? Does anything? Do they have what it takes? Paris?
I think it's going to be very interesting. Fox Bet would be a good example. So they have this massive following. The brand is beyond recognized. The idea was, let's go into the market and we're going to just conquer it, because everybody knows Fox Bet. I mean, Draftkings is actually more of a oh my God, my mind is so blank. What? Not play for fun. What's
DFS.
That? Yes,
yeah.
DFS. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I think that they think and believe that their product is going to follow over because of their following. But somebody was saying earlier, their mom bought them a hat, so they have a Fanatics account. Yeah. Is she going to bet? Probably not. So I think it's going to be an interesting awakening. I'd be surprised and impressed if they pulled it out and came up with being competitive, top 5 for sure. I don't believe it.
Give us the devil's advocate.
Look, there are easier ways in this life to make money than betting against Michael Rubin and Matt King, right? And I think that's the fundamental argument, that you have an incredibly strong team that has conviction, that has experience, that has a track record, and has staked a fair amount of the reputational capital that they've developed over the course of storied careers on success in that space. That's a lot of incentive not to fail. And it is also a relatively interesting test case of an adjacent direct-to-consumer brand testing that ability to port affinity, to port data. To Paris's point, every operator has access to a large and diverse database of customers in the U.S. for free. It's called the phone book, right? At some point, the size of the database is a canard in terms of communicating efficacy, a canard, a lie. Right? I think it's a British word. I threw it in there. I thought it would be hashtag spicy. But apparently I failed. Can we move on to the one-liners, exclamation point?
Wait, but there's one more point. Okay. They also have to have a good product. So people that have been here and been operating, they're going to have a great platform, great user experience. So that will be also contingent upon their success.
Good. Right. So we're on to the one-liners. So this section is just questions. You can give me a one word, you can give me a one line, but don't give me two because I'll cut you off. So can anyone dethrone FanDuel?
Yes.
No.
Is esports going to be a major revenue contributor to gaming?
No.
No. In the U.S.?
In the US, sorry.
No.
No.
Yeah. But where might it?
I mean, internationally, it already is a material contributor in a number of markets, and I think LATAM, especially, you're going to see it light up.
Okay.
That's like 3 lines.
Thanks. It's all right.
Too much.
It was a follow-up question, so you're okay. Is negative coverage of sports betting in the US just getting started?
Yeah.
I think we're going to cycle in and out. I think we're at a peak right now, and we're likely to cycle down, but cycle back up. There are commas in there.
Yeah, there's a hyphen. It's okay. Will that coverage make a difference, though?
Yes.
No.
It's spicy.
I'm sweating so much every time you talk.
How many national brands can the sports betting market support?
It's kind of hard to say state by state. I mean, 7.
So,
42.
oof, spicy. And last question, will we see a significant impact in sports betting from tribal operators? Chris?
Yes, I think primarily in terms of holding up expansion.
Yeah. No.
Okay. Thank you very much. That was Pardon the Disruption.
Thank you.
Thank you.